Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to continue the same class. Last time what we are discussed about the controls and clauses all we discussed last time. We will continue the same thing up to the controls, how many controls we have and what type of controls, those things, and domains, how many domains we have, 4 domains we have, right? Like uh, organizational controls, people controls, physical controls, and technology controls. We discussed up to that. Now today we are going to discuss about the clauses. The main thing, the clauses. Clauses are of 10 clauses are there. That is the mandatory clauses in the standard, right from clause 1 to clause 10. In clause 1 to clause 10, first three clauses are more into a generic thing like scope, what is the scope of ISMS, and clause 2 it talks about that normative references and all. Clause 3 talks about terms and definitions, the terms we are using in the standard, those things discussed in clause 3. And from clause 4 onwards, uh, the main content starts, like content in the sense the major activities, like clause 4 covers few major requirements, clause 5 covers few mandatory requirements like clause 6, clause 7, clause 8, clause 9, 10. These are the six mandatory things. Right from clause 4, if we're talking about clause 4, it covers the context of the organization. It's more focus on the context of that organization. What is the context here? We are going to implement that ISO 27001 2022 in your organization. What we required in that, what are the mandatory requirements we need to cover during our implementation, um, what we need to document in your manuals or policies procedures. Those things starts from clause 4 to clause 10. Clause 4 is the context of that organization, and clause 5 it's more into the leadership involvement. Leadership means you are planning to implement ISO 27001 2022 in your organization. What are the things you require to implement this, like people, process, technology, and also the required infrastructure to implement this, those things, and roles and responsibility, high level org level policies, procedures, those all things driven by leadership team. It's nothing but your governance team. And clause 6 is morely talks about the planning of risks. It is a risk based audit. ISMS is morely talks about that risk related things. While you are doing an internal audit in your organization, think about how you are performing that audit. Purely you can do that audit as a risk based approach. Means consider all that risks. If you are not having this control in place, and implement that one, and also to do some proper gap analysis for that. It's more into planning of risks. What is your risk strategy, what is your risk mitigation plans, and what is your risk acceptance value, high, medium, low risk reschedule value, treatment plans, all those things talks about in sixth clause. It's more into planning of risk management, risk assessment. Clause 7 talks about that support function. Support function is nothing but support process. To implement this standard in your organization, we need some support from people wise, infra wise, competencies we required to implement this and regularly review these controls, how effectively you are following the standard requirements. We need some competent persons to drive this exercise, like that people, human resource, competency, all those things covered in clause 7. And clause 8 it talks morely about operations. Once we set up all these things, 8, 9, 10 it talks about that operations, how these operations are performing. Means plan, do, check, act. Plan, do, check, act. Planning stage, performing stage, checking state, act. If any gaps you are finding, that will act on those and to fulfill that gaps. That is a PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, act. Planning phase is nothing but your fourth clause, fifth clause, sixth clause up to seventh clause we consider is a planning phase. Operations is nothing but your do what you are implemented, whether you are following that one, and that evidences. If you are talking about auditing language, that evidences you are tracking, monitoring of your objectives or KPIs as per your defined objectives you achieved or not. Those all things will check in the checking part. And ninth clause talks about your internal audit is nothing but your checking. Plan to check in that you are performing frequent audits of internal audits of all the teams, as defined in your organization, maybe quarterly, half yearly, monthly. Sometime organizations will do based on your frequency. You perform that internal audits, you check those things. It means whether all these controls, 93 controls which is applicable to your organization, whether they are following properly or not. Those things we'll discuss in internal audits and management review meeting. That's a check. In PDCA it will consider as check. Then last clause is talks about improvement. Once you've done all these things, plan, do, check, act and all, um, you get some outputs during your internal audits, your risk assessments and all your management calls. You get some reviews or inputs from your team. In that, what are the outcomes you are getting? Those things we'll discuss in clause 10. It's more into act on that outputs, action plans, how you are going to implement those things in your upcoming audits, or how you are going to fulfill those standard requirements. That we'll discuss in clause 10. These are the major clauses in ISMS framework, right from clause 1 to 10. This is mandatory. You need to document all these things in detail. I'll explain you next slide. Moving on to that next one. Yeah, the next slide talks about clause 4. As I mentioned to you, right, the clause 4, it's more into context of the organization. In that we have 4 subclauses. Clause 4 is the main heading. In that we have 4 subclauses which talks more into fourth clause. If you talk about the fourth clause 4.1, understand the organization and its context. Every organization, they need to identify their internal and external issues. I'll show you some examples what is internal issues and external issues as well. Let me open that. Internal issues and external. Yeah, this is the internal and external issues. If you talk about these internal issues, while implementing this standard, you need to consider the internal issues. Internal issues is nothing but within your organization, maybe your employees, technology, and also you have a plan to implement your information security infrastructure you required. Those all things you consider as an internal issues. You identify those things as an internal issue. What are the things you need to improve, that you need to capture in your context of that organization. 4.1 internal and external issue. Like that, if you talk about that external issues is nothing but who is depending on you, or you are getting some support from external vendors, or also some mandatory requirements like your regulatory and legal requirements is mandatory to run the business, and also some acts, IT act. If you are running a business of IT and software company, IT act, data protection, PII related thing. And also if you are doing some business in Middle East or European continent, they have some regulatory requirements like GDPR, and also some country specific standards. If you talk about Australia, IRAP, or some Australian privacy acts, like that, you need to document all those things in your external issues. And also your market expectations. If you are dealing with a robust product, means which is familiar and they are using some other products, competitors also you need to consider, because your what the customers are expecting, based on that you need to groom your product or services. That is also considered as an external factor. Like threats landscape, this is the major thing in nowadays. A lot of IT companies are facing challenges because some inside threats or third party supplier compromise. Means service provider, they are providing some services, they unfortunately got attacked by some ransomware or some they compromise their systems if you are depending on that service provider, because indirectly your business also impacting. You need to consider those things as well. And the fourth point is a climatical change requirement. Climatical change is the mandatory requirements in 2024 um, across the globe. ISO amended this clause in fourth clause, means every company they need to um, mention, document this climate change requirements. For example, if you are running a software company, means your everything is hosted in cloud, your infrastructure and everything is hosted in cloud. But what is your contribution? The ultimate goal, what is your organization contribution to minimize the environmental effect or carbon footprint? What is your contribution towards the climatical change? As an example, I'll tell you few, like moving the IT infrastructure into cloud. That is one thing. And secondary is reducing electric consumption. That is one thing. And also reducing cap facilities and all uses of plastic. Like that, some companies they identify these things and they publish their reports as well. But if you talk about the manufacturing companies or um, any pharma companies, the climatical change is very huge topic. It's like environmental management system. They have annual report. They published that one, the pollution certificates and all. That for such type of companies, this is very mandatory requirement. Not only that companies, but IT companies, climate change related thing is okay, manageable, because we are not that much, in fact, that much impacting on climate, because everything, if nowadays all small, big size, medium size companies are moving to cloud instead of having the physical data centers. That's why maybe we can consider that as IT companies wise climate change is little less compared to manufacturing and all. Okay, this is about the clause 4. This is a mandatory thing. And then moving on to clause 5. Yeah, as I mentioned to you, right, this is the clause 4 requirement amended in across the globe. They are responsible to climatical change and recognizing the importance and implementing sustainability practices. As I mentioned to you that example, this is mandatory requirement. If you are going to implement ISMS in your organization, this is the mandatory thing you need to document in your framework. Okay. Yeah, moving on to this clause 5. Clause 5 talks about leadership. In that clause 5 we have three sub clauses like leadership and commitment. It's more into the top level governance in the sense ultimately the person who is sponsoring to implement this one is the main person to drive this implementation, because they have taken some initiation to implement ISMS in your organization. That leadership and commitment, we need to document that one as well. And also subclause 5.2 policy statement, org level information security policy, that is different in your organization as per your nature of work and delivery. It's a governance level, high level management will define these policies and all, and on regularly an annual basis they review this information security management system policy as well. I'll show you few samples related to these three sub clauses as well. And clause 5.3, organizational roles and responsibilities. It's nothing but which team is going to drive this one. If you are a small company, there is no dedicated infosec team or GRC or some compliance team in your organization. Maybe the person who is handling the IT infrastructure, maybe they can drive this one, because most of the controls are related to IT related controls. I'll discuss you more about in my controls and all, what technological controls is there. Those things I'll discuss with you. But now I'll show you one sample of scope statement. This is the scope statement. As a sample, I'll mention it here. The scope statement gives the overall picture of information security. Means, for example, if your organization is dealing with a web application development, or you have some good product development, the services you need to, what you are offering to your customer, that you need to put in your um, a scope statement. And also that locations, for example, you have some different offices across the globe or across the country. uh, how extent you want to implement this one, for at least for one site, or you are going to implement this certification. For example, if we are talking about my main office is in, head office is in India, but I have some other branch offices in Australia, New Zealand, or USA, UK. You have some small offices in other countries as well. If you want to extend this one, you need to finalize that the scope. You need to define that scope. uh, what are all sites you want to go bring into your scope statement. Example, main location is India, but you have offices across, you want to add US and Australia as well. In that place, you need to mention the certificate boundaries and locations as well. Example scope statement, as I mentioned to you, that is the example. Like for example, if any certification body uh, wants to audit the standard requirements against the standard ISO 27001 2022 clauses, they first discuss about the SOA, statement of applicability, that I'll explain you separately. It's a big topic. I'll explain you in detail. And their next point, they discuss about the scope of the audit. The scope of the audit is, it's more, it tells you the as an example scope, the provision of operations and management of information security. You have, as I mentioned to you, a design, development, manufacturing. You have a very good product. You are enhancing your product as customer requirements. That is the scope you want to add in, that is the scope you want to bring into your certificate. Okay. That's why you mention like this: development, manufacturing, testing, supply, training. These are all things you want to add in your scope. And also SOA, as I mentioned to you, that statement of applicability. Statement of applicability is nothing but which controls is applicable to your organization. That will comes in your scope statement as well. That I'll explain you separately. And it is clause 5, as I mentioned to you, these are all roles and responsibilities. Leadership is nothing but your people, process, technology, and infrastructure. What resources you require to implement the ISO 27001 2022 in your organization. People required, process you need to define which process you want to add in your scope statement. Technologies, for example, your entire data is hosted in AWS or Azure. How you are monitoring that one, which tools you are using, maybe what are the antiviruses you are using, how you are managing your patches, how you are managing your technical vulnerabilities. Those are all things. What infrastructure maybe you have, what solutions you are using. MDM, are you using any DLP or MDM solutions? Those are all things required. These are infra level requirements. These are all things that will take care by leadership clause. As I mentioned, it's a policies and high level strategy defined by the top management to consider all that risk, internal and external issues, legal and statutory requirements. And the fifth subclause 5.3 clause talks about roles and responsibility. It's similar. Means you have some dedicated ISMS team. What are the roles and responsibilities? You need to define that one. If you have a governance committee or information security, these are examples I mentioned here. Risk owners or ZRC, executive management. These all are roles usually they define in the organization. Yeah, that's it. This is about class 4 and 5. We'll have that other sessions, other 6th class, 7th, 8th and 9th in upcoming videos. I'll prepare that content and upload in the next video. Hope this video gives some idea on how you are going to define this in your ISMS framework. If you like, yeah, record all the sample or examples here in this video. I put all those internal and external issues. Example, what type of external and internal issues are there? Those things I'll put it in this Word document. It is easy reference for you. You just go through all those things. You get some basic idea based on this. What is internal and external issues? How you want to frame your information security policy, what is your scope and boundaries related thing, and how, and also your leadership commitment, and the governance level, what are the decisions is they can, and also what required support from top management and policy statement sample I'll kept in this video. And also I'll mention about the roles and responsibilities specific to this um, information security. What are the roles and responsibilities are there, or what they need to uh, prepare before going for that implementation. Those sample things I put in this. Please review all those things, go through with these things. As an example I put here, like how the external issues, internal issues, policy, scope statement, roles and responsibilities and all. Hope this will help to you. This content will help to you. If you like my video, please subscribe to my channel, and thank you for watching. Thank you.